Hello and welcome to Good Conversations. We're honored today to have with us Mike Durglo Jr., who's the Division of Environmental Protection Manager for the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes. What we'll be talking with Mike about today is his work on the Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes Climate Change Strategic Plan, which is now in process. And it's a big topic, Mike.
It is. I'm not the professional by far. I'm learning every day of the impacts of climate change on not only our region, but globally. I mean, there's so much information out there. It's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, incredibly complex.
It is.
There's probably no more complex issue. I was mentioned to you before we started that our second guest on the show was Steve Running, the professor at the University of Montana, who is a co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on this issue. And I mean, he'd say he's still struggling to learn
Absolutely.
and get a grasp on this. So, well, for our viewers who might not know, tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Well, Tom, I'm the oldest of 6 children. My dad is Mike Sr., my mom is Barbara. A lot of people might remember my grandfather Conrad and my grandma Adele. We were raised very much in the traditional way, which was very fortunate, for that, and then around our grandparents and our parents. My brother Joe is, as a lot of people know, is a chairman. My brother Jim is the department head of forestry, and my sister Donna works at housing, and my sister Caroline works at SNK technology, and my brother Dan, who's the teacher of the family, he just was promoted, I guess, to the middle school principal in St. Ignatius.
Oh, he was? Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. And give us a little brief overview of your position, your job, and what your duties are.
Well, as you said earlier, Tom, I'm the division manager for the Environmental Protection Division at Natural Resource Department. I've been in this position for about 2 years now, but I've worked in the Natural Resource Department for about 15 years. This last month, it was my 28th anniversary working for the tribes in different capacities. In my division, I have several programs: the water quality program, air quality program, shoreline protection, so several programs within my division. And I also sit as on a couple of regional committees and national committees, the National Tribal Science Council. So we're all talking about the effects of climate change and what we can do in the future to ensure that our children and our grandchildren can enjoy the things that we have today.
Well, we'll hopefully be getting more into the details of that, of the nature of this problem and how it's unfolding here or is expected to unfold in the future here and what can be done about it. But let's talk, if we could, a little bit about the plan itself. What is this plan? What's its goal? And what would be its benefits to the tribes and the community as a whole?
Well, about 3 or 4 months ago, my brother Jim and I were talking about the planning processes, I guess, that different organizations and different departments within the tribe are actually working on climate change adaptation. So we talked about, okay, we need to maybe form a committee. So we did that. We formed a committee which is comprised of different representatives from each department of the tribe. And we put together a resolution that we brought to tribal council. They passed that resolution and basically says that the tribe acknowledges that climate change is occurring, and that we were tasked with then identifying some of the vulnerabilities. Just for instance, the bull trout, which are very vulnerable to changes in temperature in the streams. So we received a couple of grants to help us in this process. One was from GNLCC, which is Great Northern Landscape Conservation Cooperative, and then Kresge Foundation through the University of Montana, to help us with this planning. And the goal is for us to come up with a plan, identify the vulnerabilities by June of this year. And then, you know, in my mind, it'll be a living document. So we will review the document annually. We'll work with different departments in trying to address some of the impacts that are occurring within those medias, tribal health and human services, fisheries,
Right.
wildlife,
Okay.
you know.
Seems like it's going to have to be a living document because the information we're getting about climate change, what the predictions are, the rate of change that's occurring, these things
Absolutely.
are changing.
And just on the news last night, I don't know if you watched the news, but Mark Haka said, you know, this year is the first time that they know that we haven't been below zero, the temperature,
Yeah.
average temperature. So I think that's in Missoula,
Right.
but I mean, we've all seen that. It hasn't been
Yeah.
very cold at all.
Yeah. Well, we can get into some more of the evidence here in a moment too for climate change. Not only how much it's occurring, but the causes. So part of the planning process then, the members of this planning team are members of these different departments within the tribes?
Right. Within the tribe, each department is asked to have one representative, if not the department head, then one representative from that department to help us in the planning process. And there is steps, you know, that you take during the planning process. One of those is to have to identify vulnerabilities within that department. So just say fisheries, for instance. If you give them like a scenario that the average annual temperature will increase by 5 degrees in the next 20 years, how do they mitigate for that? How do they plan for that? How do they, you know, plan for restoration projects?
Right. Right. Well, yeah, I can see that it's going to be complex and different from department to department how to deal with this. Let's talk a little bit about the issue itself now. I mean, it's hard to imagine anybody hasn't heard of this, but if you're introducing some school kids to this issue, how do you describe what climate change is?
Well, you know, the one thing that I've learned is that climate change is not, there's a difference between weather, what is the word?
And weather, daily weather versus climate?
Right. Climate change is accumulation of basically data, maybe temperature over a 30-year period, at least a 30-year period. So it's a long-term change in, you know, like average temperature. So they're looking at past data to try to make, I guess, predictions of what it's going to be in the future.
Right.
So,
so they're actually looking at thousands of years too, aren't they, with the ice cores
Yes.
and things like that? And okay, and part of what they're doing too is trying to trace out there's certain markers in that data, I guess, that indicate what the causes are. Is that correct?
Yeah. If you look at, I mean, there's so much information out there, and bottom line is the increased amounts of greenhouse gases, what they call them, CO2, things like that. So the increase in the amount of gases in the atmosphere and the you know, the trapping of the heat from the sun is and there. I mean, like we talked about earlier, you know, some of the melting ice in the polar region, you know, the ice caps. Yeah. So they're shrinking over years, and that causes more, I guess, increase in temperature.
Yeah, dramatic loss in ice cover up there. I guess it's from what I understand, the impacts are occurring much more rapidly in the Arctic than down here, and there's some concern that because it's happening more gradually down here, we're kind of like frogs in the pot,
right?
Getting slowly cooked and not realizing the extent of the change that's around us.
Yeah, and you know, a lot of times people don't react until they are impacted. they have a direct impact. And I mean, if you just drive down the valley, you can see those impacts.
Yeah.
I mean, even in our homes, you know, I've noticed different bugs and insects that I've never seen before.
Yeah.
And people are telling me, you know, they're bringing in bugs to my office. Say, well, what is this? And you know, I've never seen this before. But it's not just bugs, but plants, invasive plant species, things that are happening. You know, like in Glacier Park, the number of glaciers has decreased over the last century dramatically.
Dramatically. Yeah.
And I went to a meeting up there on climate change last year, and they're saying, if you want to see the glaciers in Glacier Park, you better come up within the next 10 years.
Yeah.
So, they might be gone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I've heard even the next few years. I think maybe their latest unfortunate prediction was by 2020 it'll be the park formerly known as Glacier. But I gather your son who's with you today and your grandson.
two upcoming scientists.
Two upcoming scientists have a neat little experiment they can do for our viewers that's going to demonstrate just how some of these scientific processes involved in climate change happen.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as we know, about 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, and that water helps to keep our Earth atmosphere cool. So as the temperature of the water increases, then the cooling process is affected in that way. So, you know, we're going to have warming atmospheric temperatures.
Okay.
So yeah, they're gonna have a little demonstration and an experiment to share with us. So
I understand it involves balloons
Yeah.
and fire. So I don't know if Frank's going to do this in the studio or outside, but to our viewers, we're going to cut away to this experiment right now. Please watch as Mike's son and grandson,
Michael and John,
give our viewers a little demonstration about how climate change is happening. Stay with us.
So as we talked about earlier with Tom, we was talking about the fact that about 70% of the Earth's surface is covered with water, and how that water helps to keep the Earth's atmosphere cool. And our little scientists here are going to demonstrate how the atmosphere absorbs or doesn't have as much capability of absorbing heat as Earth's water. So John represents the Earth's atmosphere. I represent the sun. So as the sun touches the atmosphere, there we go.
Pick up and then go click. Damn time is delicate. He knows it's mess up with me.
So as you can see, the water absorbed a lot more of that heat than the atmosphere did. The balloon represented the atmosphere.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the experiment that John and Michael just performed for us. It's fascinating. And it shows some of the basic physiological processes that are occurring, except on a global scale with our atmosphere and our oceans.
It is, and it's kind of the global thinking that, you know, we need to think about, along with just our regional and local impacts. The global impacts are affecting us too. Sometimes we don't think about that, you know, because it doesn't directly affect us right here, right now. But if we look at the Arctic and the ice sheet melting and the ability of the oceans, and not just the oceans, but the lakes, Flathead Lake, the Great Lakes, to absorb that heat, they can only absorb so much. And then with the melting ice caps, you get more of the dark surface of the water rather than the white surface of the snow caps reflecting the sun's rays and the heat.
So instead of reflecting, now they're
absorbing more.
And I've heard it sometimes described as the difference between a black car sitting in the sun and a white car sitting in the sun.
Exactly, yeah.
That black car gets hot.
Yep.
And the other thing about water is it stores that heat for a long time, doesn't it?
It does. You know, a lot longer than just say land, the surface of the earth. You know, we always hear about lake effects.
Yeah.
You know, that's one thing that happens. Whether it's cold or hot,
Yeah.
it stores the heat and the cold a little bit longer. So.
Yeah. But you know, it again, to me, also connects back to this strange thing about climate change, that even if we were to stop, you know, I mean that the fire that your boys were using to heat the balloons is kind of a stand-in for the coal-fired power plants and the automobiles and everything else worldwide that are putting heat and pollution that absorbs solar heat, even more importantly, into our atmosphere. But it can feel overwhelming, and yet every little thing we do to reduce that reduces the severity of future global warming, doesn't it?
Sure, and you know, there is things that we can do individually and community, regionally, and of course globally. Even like you said, Tom, even if we stopped using fossil fuels today, if we stopped using cars, I'm not saying that, you know, we need to do that, but we need to think about the impacts that we have on, you know, just our area and the amount of cars. You know, we can utilize the transportation program. It's a good program that the tribe has, more mass transportation, and just doing the small things, which, you know, could have it might seem small, but it helps.
Yeah.
You know, like you said, if we stop doing everything we do today, the train has left the station. In, you know, the way I think is the train has left the station, and it's going to take a long time for it to maybe start reversing itself.
But how long it takes for it to start reversing is affected by how much energy we're putting into that engine right now.
Yep.
So one of the things that you've mentioned to me off camera is that traditional ecological knowledge, what's this abbreviation that's often used today, TEK, is a central part and kind of a unique part of what you're engaging with in developing this plan.
It is, Tom, and you know, I've read several plans, the adaptation plans for climate change. The Swinomish tribe, I've read theirs. Missoula County has done one, and what is unique about our plan is that we want to integrate traditional ecological knowledge, cultural knowledge into the plan. So I've met with the elders. I've got about 10 of the elders right now that are that volunteered to do interviews to talk about climate change. As you know, at the elders meeting, several of them already have shared some of their knowledge with us down there. We didn't tape it or we didn't record it. I guess it's recorded at the Longhouse on the tape recorder, but what we want to do is to video some of the elders, both the Salish elders and the Kootenai elders, and just get their perspective of what they've seen over the last 30, 40, 50 years, and how it's changed our valley and our reservations. So.
Yeah.
But it's unique. I mean, it's not. I haven't seen it in any other plan,
Yeah.
so it's unique for us.
Yeah.
And I think it's exciting for me to do that.
Yeah, that's wonderful and very interesting. I mean, so some of the questions are going to be about the observations they've made in their long lifetimes about the changing climate here. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, I just think about when I was a boy.
Yeah.
And sitting outside my grandparents' house, and my grandfather looked up at the mountain. He said, "Mike, if that glacier ever melts right there, there's gold under there." And at that time I thought, like, really, it's never going to melt, because hardly ever in my, when I was younger, I don't remember that glacier ever melting. But in the last, 20 years or so, it's an every year occurrence So it's no longer really a glacier. It's basically a snowfield. But so I never been back up there to see if there's gold there. But you know, that's just one of the things. You know,
one of the things. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking also, for example, I mean the creation literature of the tribes, the traditional creation literature, the coyote stories. It's February now, so I guess we can mention this. Hopefully, we'll make it snow a little more.
Yeah.
But I guess a number of those are about the establishment of the modern climate regime of our 4 seasons today. So they refer in different ways to climate. Is that?
They do, and you know, there's different stories that talk about, you know, how one of the tools that Jermaine and some of the other people put together, and I think you had a part in that, is fire on the land. How fire has changed and affected the environment in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely stories, and there's coyote stories integrated throughout that process, or that development of that video.
And are you going to also be looking to interview the elders, your dad, presumably one of them,
Yep.
About how also the impact upon these things has a unique kind of impact to the tribes culturally?
It is, Tom, and you know, that's the on, what was it, Tuesday? The elders met, or Wednesday? Day before yesterday, and that's one of the things that they talked about then is, you know, some of our medicinal and cultural plants. If the environment changes for those plants, then, you know, you could lose certain plants. I mean, you know, Pat talked about the camas and camas prairie, how it used to be years ago that the whole camas prairie used to be covered in blue, you know, in the springtime from the camas, and you don't see that much anymore. And that's not just from climate change, it's from different, you know, how they use the land, agricultural. That has impacted a lot of things, so, and different pesticide use and stuff like that. So it's not just changing climate, but the way that we live, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when I hear the elders talk about that kind of thing, it strikes me, it's not just, you know, about the loss of a food source, for example, camas, which is a critical staple in the traditional diet, or bull trout, also a crucial food source, but also the kind of cultural, spiritual aspect of that, that it's kind of seems like it holds an importance in the tribal way of life.
And I've heard different elders talk about the spiritual aspect of that, and you know, I've heard people say, well, why can't we take and plant these plants in different locations then? And you know, I've heard them say, well, then the spirit is not there. Once you start cultivating and doing that type of thing, the spirit really loses kind of the power, I guess, of those things. And you know, different plants will be affected in different ways, depending on, you know, where they're at. If they're up high in the mountains, you know, if we start losing some of the snowpack and the water availability up there, it's going to impact those plants too.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things too that strikes me as you're talking about this, Mike, is that almost everything that was here is still here at this point. We're kind of at this critical moment, seems like.
Right, yep.
Because even though they're all still here, a number of them are barely hanging on. I mean, how many are now on the endangered or threatened species list?
Well, one for sure that I know of that has recently been added is the wolverine.
Yeah.
I think that's being, you know, considered for listing as endangered. So.
Specifically because of the threat of climate change, isn't it?
Yep, exactly. And you know, I just think of what I see and what I don't see. You know, I haven't seen a porcupine in probably 20 years. You know, what happened to them? Is it partially because of climate change, or is it land use, or what is it? I know that the wildlife program is studying that right now. So different, you know, you hear the pika. They depend on the snowpack and the glaciers and that for their survival. Wolverines depend on those for corridors.
Pikas can't go up any higher, I guess.
No.
And so they're just disappearing from some areas.
Absolutely.
Already.
And we can't move the reservation. So we're here. So we need to take care of it, you know, in the best way we can.
Yeah.
you know, for future generation.
Well, that's a wonderful place to stop for this first show, because I think it really is a summary of one of the reasons why the tribes have shown this long, consistent leadership in taking care of the land. And I thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank
today,
you, Tom.
Mike. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Great talk. And to our viewers, we hope, Mike, are you going to join us for another half hour to talk about this?
If you'll have me.
Oh, we'll definitely have you. So to our viewers, tune in next week or in the following program, and we'll continue our conversation with Mike Durglo Jr. about the tribe's climate change and the development of their strategic plan on this issue. Thanks for watching. So long.